Is anyone going to actually stand on a standing desk for the whole conference, guys? Is anyone attempting it?
I typically stand all day for work.
Already stood for a couple hours, so I actually needed to sit down now for a minute, but I'll probably get back up later.
I haven't.
This is my.
I've never used it.
This is my standing view, so that if the kids come in, you won't see them. There's actually a tactic. That's why it's always standing desk in meetings.
All right.
And you never risk standing up and showing everybody that you don't wear pants.
So we are now live streaming on YouTube. I'm going to provide the link here if anybody feels like they, want to share it. So I put that in the chat, and let me go ahead and share my screen really quickly. If I can find. Okay, there we go. There it is. Okay, everyone, welcome to Vue Contributor Days. So excited to be here today and have amazing conversations. This event is presented by This.media, the Vue core team, as well as Vue Amsterdam and Passionate People. So thank you to all the collaborators who have been having conversations and putting this together. We're very, very excited to do this. A little bit about This. We are a consultancy. We do a lot of fun Vue stuff. Lindsay on the call and Simone are both from our team, and we are doing some just really cool things with Vue.js right now with a lot of our clients. So, and we're also hiring. So come hang out with us. Evan, do you want to say anything on behalf of the Vue core team?
Hello.
Hi.
All right. Hi. Thanks everyone for coming today. So yeah. So I guess if you're watching this, you know what the Vue team does, and you should. I think we are all really appreciative of all the efforts our core team, our team members put into the project, and also all the, contributors from the ecosystem, because this is a collective effort, and everyone's contribution is what makes Vue a project that that's making positive changes in developers' lives. So thank you all.
Thanks, Evan. And then also Vue Amsterdam. Do we have anybody from the team for Vue Amsterdam and or Passionate People that wants to say something?
I could imagine that they are currently busy because they're running this conference.
Yes, they are. Yes. Well, Vue Amsterdam again has been amazing at helping coordinate this, and all the work that the hard work that they put into Vue.js Amsterdam, the team over at Passionate People. So definitely check them out. They're really awesome organization. We have a bunch of different contributors / panelists on the call today. So I won't go through each one individually, but we will do introductions in just a little bit. So thank you everyone for coming. The goal of Vue Contributor Days really is to facilitate conversation and find ways to contribute and get involved. And everybody also has been in their Vue silos, basically, right? That I think, without conferences, the collaboration and the communication of like everything that's happening within the Vue ecosystem is kind of missed. And so we've been doing contributor days with the Angular core team, React, GraphQL as well. And we're so excited to collaborate again with Evan on this and Vue Amsterdam, because I don't know about you all, but I just miss the hallway track and the speaker conversations, you know, and like the really cool things that come out of that and the collaboration. So hopefully we can do that today. So we do have a code of conduct, so please make sure to be nice here and abide by, you know, Vue community code of conduct and rules, please. And if you feel uncomfortable in any way, please feel free to reach out to myself or Evan or Ben or anyone else really, so that we can help solve those problems for you. Evan will be giving us a quick state of Vue upcoming, and then we're going to have a bunch of community folks as well and community projects give quick updates on their projects. We'll obviously have a bio break or a beer break, however you like to look at it. And then we'll be talking about a few different topics. So the Vue 2 to Vue 3 migration, Vue and TypeScript, you know, each one of these conversations is about half an hour long, followed by a bio break. And then we'll be talking about tooling and kind of like ad hoc topics, right? Discussing things like Vite and other things. And then we have at the end as well, just open discussion time. So again, you know, those of you who are new or, you know, just like kind of like looking to get involved, this is a great opportunity to just hang out and chat. So I'm excited to see what comes out of this. Evan, do you have anything to say before we go into the state of Vue stuff?
Not really.
Okay, cool. Well, I will stop sharing my screen and give it to you then.
Sure. So I don't actually have slides since I'm supposed to be giving a more actual state of Vue talk tomorrow. So this one will be quite brief since it's really just targeted towards contributors who are pretty, I believe most of you are pretty familiar with what's been going on. But so I'm just going to quickly go through a few things. So first of all, what's been going on in the past few months? You probably know that I've been really busy with Vite. So Vite is this new build tool that I've been working on. It initially started as just a quick dev server to just be able to load Vue single file components. Basically, the real initial goal was to provide a development experience for Vue single file components, just like serving it over a static file server, right? But obviously, later on, you still need more features, and it kind of evolved into what Vite is today. So we released Vite 2.0 a while ago, and it is now, I would say, covers most of the common use cases, and it has a that we are, as modern tool chains, we're kind of used to, and offers a pretty flexible plugin system. So long story short, Vite is essentially going to be the foundation that we are going to be focusing on for future Vue-oriented tooling, because I believe it significantly improves the overall DX, the development experience, especially for users who are just getting into all this Node.js tool chain stuff. I've always felt, for a new Vue user to jump directly into Vue CLI is just way too heavy-handed. And putting them through Webpack and all that stuff is just that doesn't feel like the ideal experience for a progressive framework where we want to provide, this very smooth jump from, oh, just load the script in your browser and refresh it, to now you have to install, 120 megabytes, maybe 200 megabytes of node modules just to get started. So Vite is essentially an attempt to provide the same level or even better development experience, but with a much lighter curve for users to jump through. So I believe we've achieved that goal. So and I'm really happy about where Vite is right now. And so I'm excited to see how the ecosystem. I mean, Vite already has an ecosystem growing up, and I'm excited to see how this would I guess the purpose of one of the purposes of an event like this one today is to discuss with everyone about, how would Vite affect some of the things you guys been doing, and how like what we can do to make sure that for end users, it's a adopting, whether they are using Vue CLI or Vue or even other tooling, it should be, we want to make sure it's a coherent ecosystem, instead of everything is, you have to do everything differently with different tooling. So that's one of the things we want to discuss, whether having a new alternative tool chain would affect the thing you've been working on, and how do you think that might improve some of the stuff that you're working on. So that's the tooling part. On the Vue core end, so obviously there hasn't been too much going on in the past few months. So since Vue 3 has released, we are mostly focused on tooling and making sure Vue 3 core is stable. So, but I believe now that Vite is out of the door, it's good time to, focus back on Vue core again and look at the migration stories, look at potential I11 support. Just also, I know a lot of the major ecosystem tools are now having closing to alpha, beta, or beta stages with Vue 3 compatibility. So I think it's also a good time for us to, figure out what are the what are the hurdles you have been running into when adapting your work for Vue 3, so that we can either fix them, find solutions to them, and just making sure everyone, your release that relies on Vue 3 can be a solid one. So I think once we achieve that, some of the popular tooling for the ecosystem released Vue 3 compatible version, we've provide a good migration path. I think that is what I would consider the real, the real time where we can say, like, everyone should use Vue 3 now, instead of now, like, you should only use it in a new project, or you should only use it if you're, you're brave or exploratory. So I think for Vue 3 to get out of that sort of it's still kind of new sort of stage for people, it is important for the ecosystem to all be there together. So that is for Vue core. So some of the things I kind of been planning to do in terms of release schedule is this kind of has to do with how I've been trying to manage the workload on my end, because I'm really bad at kind of switching contexts. So say I've been working on Vite and it sort of sucks me into it, and we have some of the patches on Vue core kind of get stuck and not get released. So I want to sort of adjust our release schedule to be more predictable, so that no matter how many patches we get in, as long as there are patches, we should make a patch release maybe once a week or twice a week, so that whenever something's fixed, it's always released promptly, instead of getting stuck and waiting on a planned release. So I think that's how patch releases should work, and I'm hoping that we can work something out like that. Maybe even automate it. Like, it feels a bit risky, but at least we should have a more predictable patch release cycle. I'm also thinking of making our minor releases less chunky per se. So in the past, every time we do a minor release, it always comes with kind of a, it has a code name. It has, we always figure out, like, this release needs to contain something significant. It's a bunch of features that we want to release together. But I feel like it's not really necessary. Like, we don't really have to do it that way, as long as we sort of agree with the fact that a minor release, as long as it has new features, it could be a minor release. So essentially reduce the significance of what minor releases mean, so that we can get features out quicker. instead of waiting to bundle things together and always push it out together, which is also more risky in a sense. So these are the things I've been considering. I think for ecosystem tools and users, this should be beneficial because essentially we just want to avoid things getting blocked or kind of cross-blocked. Like you want this feature really bad, but we're like, oh, we need to wait for this release, and which means we need to wait for this other thing, right? So so these are the things that we are trying to think on the release schedule front. And some of the other stuff that we've been sort of working on in the past few months, but not consolidated, are some of the new RFCs like script setup, which I think is going to be a pretty significant DX improvement, especially for those who are using competition APIs. And one of the things we were concerned about before we put it out of our RFC state is IDE support, because when we put the RFC out, there was no, if you use script setup, you essentially lose all IntelliSense and IDE support. But now that we have a new extension called Volar, I don't know if Johnson is here today, but we should have invited him. But if he's not here, apologies. So Johnson's been doing a really great work on Volar, which provides IDE support and full TypeScript-based IntelliSense for script setup. So this combined with script setup, I believe, is going to be a very interesting development experience improvement for using competition API in single file components. So this is one of the things I think we want to essentially consolidate. And so this kind of leads into another interesting topic, which is how the whole TypeScript IDE tooling fit together with Viter, with Vuedx, with Volar, which is something I think we should also sort of discuss a bit. And that said, that's actually most of the things I want to talk about here. So let's move on. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Evan. It's very exciting. So before we go into community updates, I just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to just say hi. Who are you, right? So if you guys can just keep it at like 3 seconds, 5 seconds. So I'll go first. Tracy, follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet, CEO of This.Labs. And feel free to just unmute your mic and say.
Hello, I'm Rahul. Okay, I'm core team member of Vue.js. Okay.
Thanks, Rahul.
Okay, hello. I'm Kia. I'm Vue.js core team member. I just want to say Vuex rocks.
I'm Debbie. I'm here to Nuxtify the world.
Hi, I'm Torsten, Vue.js core team member, and I don't have a fancy slogan.
I'm
John
Lindsay
Leader.
Wardell. Oh, go ahead, John.
John Leader, author of Vuetify.
I'm Lindsay Wardell, host on Views on Vue and software engineer at This.Labs.
Ben Hong, Vue core team.
Carnival, Vue core team, and composition API for the win.
Hi, I'm Cospo, Vue INT creator.
Hi, I'm Paolo, or Callo, and I'm from the Quasar core team.
Hi, I'm Christopher Kortflieg, author of Prettier Plugin Pack for providing first-class support for Vue, and also known as Shinigami92 in GitHub.
Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm on the Next team.
Hi, I'm Puya. I'm also at Next team.
Hi, I'm Sebastian, and I'm the author of Next, part of the Next team. And you can find me at Linux.
Hi, I'm Mike. I work for Ionic.
Hi, I'm Hao Qinjiang. I'm from the Vue core team and I work full-time on Vue.js.
And I'm Simone, Senior Software Engineer at ThisDot and Vue lover.
Anyone else want to go?
Yeah, my name's Darren Jennings, author of Swerve. It's a stale while revalidate library for Vue Composition API and Vue 3.
Hello, I'm Chen Zhanglin. I'm from Vue.js team, and I'm the core member of the and design Vue. I'm working on ByteDance now.
All right. Well, that was awesome.
Hi.
Oh, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Yo-Yo. I'm work from Inter.
I think he said future. All right. In the
That's Johnson.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just wanted to say that's Johnson, the author of Vitor, right?
Yes.
So he's here. He's here. We have him.
Welcome. Nice.
In the interest of time, we're going to move on. But if you haven't introduced yourself, feel free to go ahead and do a little introduction in the chat. Thank you, everyone, for the introduction. We are moving on to community updates. So we had previously spoken to a few of you. So for those of you who we know are presenting, who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Sure.
So good thing there's no slides allowed because I didn't make any. But it was just a kind of a quick update to let everyone know where the Vuetify team is at on version 3. I know it's been a sore spot for some people. We are on progress or on track to release the alpha on March 2nd, which will be next Tuesday. We have a lot of really exciting features in there, and fortunately, because of the way that the previous version was developed using lots of mixins, they kind of naturally convert over to the new Vue 3 composable API. So we've had, as each piece gets put in, the lower level mixins and composables, everything starts to come together really quick, and we're making some really great progress. So March 2nd, we're going to start the alpha, and we're going to have nightly and weekly builds. So if you're interested in taking a look at any of that, just make sure you're watching the Vuetify or my Twitter. That's all.
Thank you. So who would like to go next? I can just call people out if you want as well. Does Kazuya from Vue Internationalization want to give an update?
Okay. Slides. Just a moment. Slides. Sorry. Sorry. But my environment. Sorry. Next.
Sorry.
Please. Yeah. Please. Sorry.
Did you want us to move on and give you a second? Or
I think that's what he means.
okay, cool. Awesome. Sebastian and Puya for next. I have you guys up on my list next.
Sure, you can go first.
You can go ahead, Priya.
Well, in present months, we had a hard job because we had to keep two major versions of Next Live working on Next to make it stable enough, and also developing Next 3. Tomorrow we have a new announcement to working on a new server engine to decouple the most important part of the Next, which is server-side rendering. And yeah, it's getting to be like more released, and people can finally use Vue 3.
And yeah, basically what Priya said, we will announce more stuff tomorrow with a demo because it's quite advanced to explain right now. With the slides, it will be much easier.
So exciting. Now we have, oh, I'm going to butcher it. Is it Jean Zhou? Is that right? For Ant Design Vue.
Oh, I believe it's Chen Zhang. Chen Zhang, I think Jingzhou cannot make it today, so he asked someone else to stand in for him.
Okay.
Is he still here? let me
I'm
ping
here.
him on.
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry.
So yeah, do you want to talk about updates for Ant Design Vue or anything? You know, if not, you can just pass if you want. Oh, you're muted.
Because for some reasons, Jingzhou Tang, he can't participate in this event. So I'm here to participate in this event on behalf of the Ant Design Vue. So now we have fully supported Vue 3, and we can put the documentation and provide some demos of the composition API usage, and some components, but some components was not reflected with composition API. But we will be finished in the future, and we did some performance optimization, make something good. So something like virtual scrolling is enabled for the select and auto selected component at the present, but for some reasons, list, tree, and table was not supported right now, and we will consistent optimization and improvement the commercial versions like an Admin Pro. So that's all.
Thank you. We have two more folks. Let's go with Paolo from Quasar. I know you have a lot of exciting updates.
Hi there. So I'll start with the Quasar V2 beta, which has been released 2 weeks ago, supports Vue 3, and it has been a major rewrite. Actually, we start off with the idea of just making it work with Vue 3, but then I don't know, we got catch up, and we did a lot of major improvements. We also released this some weeks ago, the Quasar survey results of last year, which we did in November 2020. And we are now going on into the process of following what the community told us. And we're trying to be more transparent and to ask more to the community which will be the next steps of the Quasar framework. I think I'm down for now. Maybe I can talk later in the.
Awesome, perfect. Kazuya, would you like to go next? I think you're the last one.
Okay. I finished Vue 19 and next. Yeah, I'm going to release Vue 19 version 9 soon. For more information, I will be speaking at the Vue.js Amsterdam. Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Cool. We are running, I think, just on time. We have another few minutes, so I don't know if anybody else has any updates they want to share.
Well, I can just I just did a silent release for the first alpha for Portal Vue 4 Vue 3. So it's on the next branch. It's now 3.0.0 alpha 0. I just silently released it. And it's mostly meant as a compatibility release for Vue 3. It is not yet built on the new teleport feature because that would have meant that a couple of things would break. So I kind of tried to keep the functionality as close to the version for Vue 2 as possible, just to make the transition easy. And I also started working on another Portal version, Portal library, which is for now called Teleport Plus, which will be built on top of the teleport component that is native in Vue 3. So, but that will just still take some time. But a couple of people have been waiting for a release of Portal Vue for Vue 3, so you can check it out now on NPM. And there are also a couple of docs. I have an issue pinned in the repository that has a link to the new documentation that is still in the works, but mostly everything for the migration should be documented there. That's all.
Yeah. I do have a quick update, which is half related to Nuxt. Maybe some of you guys are already aware about Nuxt content and the fact that we have a docs theme based on Nuxt content. We decided to refactor this, move it out of Nuxt content to its own project, and it's going to be named Docus. It's accessible on docus.dev. And we're going to release it in the next following days, but you can already have a lookout. I have to create a documentation with Markdown and Vue components plus Tailwind. Yeah, that's it.
This is also time for questions if anybody has any questions about the community updates.
Maybe have a question for Paolo concerning Quasar. Quasar is quite an integrated solution with its own CLI and stuff. Have you already been experimenting or looking at Vite? Because I didn't really see an easy way to like combine the two, because you have a quite integrated setup based on Webpack.
Well, there has been some trials, but we first want to we plan to release the stable version of Quasar 2 within the Q1 of 2021, and we hope because we will still need to add the SSR support and, if possible, Webpack 5 support, and we will focus on Vite integration after that. We're still exploring that area. We did some trials and it's been really promising. It's really fast and we loved it, but we prefer to focus on the stability of what we have right now and then provide the support of it.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's also quite challenging because you also have integrations with Electron and mobile platforms, which is not something that Vite is totally focused on, because Vite is explicitly a dev server for web, right, Evan? That's what you like mentioned in a couple of issues. So there's a bunch of things that.
I missed the context here.
Well, I was talking about Quasar and in the context of Vite, because Quasar has its own CLI and it has integrations with Cordova and stuff, and I can think that's
so
you can probably build around
here's
it.
The thing though. So although Vite does have a opinionated build step, I think it is technically possible to say use Vite as the dev server, but still bundle with other bundlers under the hood. This is something I've been thinking about because Vite has a strong coupling to the browser because it's intended and designed for web projects. So it assumes that you are building something that renders in the browser, which allows us to leverage the native ESM. So if you are, say, so this gets more complicated for a system that targets multiple rendering platforms, especially if some of the rendering platforms may not give you an easy way to serve stuff over ESM. So this is something worth thinking about, but I think there are pieces from Vite that you'd be able to leverage. Yeah, this is actually a good question to go into a bit more depth because it'll have to do with the range of use cases that Quasar actually covers, and what specifically, like, what are the cases where Vite simply doesn't make sense? Because I know some people have wanted like a build watch mode from Vite because their end result doesn't work in the browser, but it's kind of interesting because when you use the build watch mode, you're essentially giving up most of the benefits that Vite provides in the first place. So if a browser ESM-based live development environment is not feasible, then in those cases, maybe it's just better to stick to what's currently working. So it's a pretty complicated topic, but I believe, I think one of the possible ways for us to tackle it is to essentially opening up Vite's a better decoupling for Vite's dev server and the build part, so that for some existing infrastructure that's using other bundlers, maybe they can use Vite as purely as a dev server and still delegate the bundling or building part to the previous ones, to the previous tools where applicable. So I think that's something we should probably discuss in the Vite roadmap and see how much benefit that would actually provide. I've actually thought about this for a little bit. We can essentially offer an alternative mode where, similar to how Snowpack does it, we can output unbundled files, so that which can be then feed into other bundlers. But that kind of greatly increases the maintenance surface. Which is why I'm not sure if it's even worth it unless there is a very strong use case that warrants the effort.
I think we can probably discuss this when we'll get to the integration of Vite. We will probably even provide a plugin, a Quasar plugin, as there is for Vue CLI, which will allow, you will lose the integrations, but you will still be able to use Vite to create a website with Quasar and its component library.
I don't have a question, but probably an announcement. As most of you guys are contributors, all of you or most of you are open source project. Don't forget that also if you need any support from the community, or if you would like to have some people to contribute to a specific part of your repo, now is the time to share the link in the chat. I'm one of those person that if I know where to help and people need help, I'm more than happy to. So, take this opportunity as well if you want to share this kind of information across. There's loads of Vue lovers that would like to help, and this is the right forum, I would say.
Well, I will speak again. Actually, with the Quasar survey of 2020, we asked for appliance for the maintainer role, as we plan to expand the team. And we got actually like 60 appliance, and it will be, right now we are trying to understand how to manage the mentorship and the recruitment process, but we plan to delegate more to the community on this.
Was that a question for me?
No, I just said that if I just said to everyone that if if anyone is looking for open source contributor part, that you actually are willing to have the the contribution of people around the industry, it was the right forum to say so. So if there was documentation need to be fulfilled, some testing to be done, or specific feature that you want the community to be involved in, it seems to be the right forum.
Well, cool. Again, thank you, Simone, for bringing that up. And yeah, please do just post it in chat. And, if you're looking for contributions or help in any areas, I know as open source contributors, we all get tired and God, will somebody just help a little bit more? And I know a lot of people on the call also are probably looking for opportunities. So if you are looking for opportunities as well, feel free to post. And maybe someone will be like, oh man, come hang out. So I think we'll move to the bio break / beer break. So we'll do that until the 25 mark. And then Evan will be leading a lot of the conversations, starting with the Vue 2 to Vue 3 migration. So we will see you all in about 12-ish minutes.
I see Debbie's ready.
Debbie's always ready for the party.
Oh, just run out. I've got to get another one.
starting to welcome everyone back. Debbie, you really are the party.
Lindsay, where's your beer?
I'm unfortunately out right now. I've got some water.
Oh well. You could have pretended. You could have said there's whiskey or something inside.
It's perfect water. It's yeah.
Mike,
Yeah,
you
nothing.
got whiskey in your cup?
No whiskey in this cup. It is still only 11:25 a.m. for me. And
That was never an excuse at a conference.
but that's a conference. It's different. I have it, back on the liquor cabinet, but it's just still too early. At
Well,
least
Daniel's just got the bottle out there.
So just like some of y'all are doing, this is a great, gathering as well to just ask whatever random questions you all might have in the chat. So feel free to do that as we move on to the next conversation. Evan, I'll let you kick it off, but basically for the next half hour or so, we'll be talking about the Vue 2 to Vue 3 migration.
All right. Okay, so obviously this is one of the things that we probably should have worked on earlier, but it got kind of delayed by all the tooling work that went into Vite. But this is going to be the major focus for me in the coming months, and I'm hoping to provide some official tooling and a compatibility build to essentially help migrate existing Vue 2 code bases. Actually, so kind of looking back at it, I think it's probably better to sort of sync this with these major libraries and ecosystem tools that also now start to support Vue 3, because we know we've looked at some of the existing code bases, and one of the more critical roadblock is some of the dependencies that they cannot refactor out of simply doesn't support Vue 3 yet. So the goal is to, there are multiple facets of this, obviously. The sum of the API changes we believe can be automatically code modded, which Haoqing has been working on for a while. And we have already a collection of code mods, not complete, but a collection of code mods that can detect and rewrite some of the API usages. For example, the global APIs. These can be done as pure code transforms. And some of them we can provide runtime compatibility. For example, some renamed methods or deprecated methods, we can just provide them in a dedicated build that will just work the same, but will emit a warning. So we still need to actually fully complete. Essentially, we have to test this on some real code bases to see how far we can get. But I'm glad to hear, say, especially for Vuetify, it's a non-trivial code base, and they've been able to migrate from mixins to composition APIs pretty fast. I think that's good to hear. Ultimately, I believe I'm also interested to hear what the experiences is from everyone here, because you probably have more firsthand experience both migrating your library to support Vue 3 and also seeing how your users using your stuff and how they have been tackling situations. So I guess from my side, essentially we're planning to fully tackle this problem in the coming months. But for this session, I'm interested to hear more thoughts from everyone here, especially if you've been directly dealing with this type of, migrating your library to support Vue 3. What are the roadblocks, the pain points? What are the things you wish to see addressed or improved?
Yeah, Can I start?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I have two contexts with the migration. The first one was I tried at work to migrate our front end from Vue 2 to Vue 3. But then we are heavily using Vuetify, and Vuetify doesn't support Vue 3 yet. So we need to cancel it, and we need to wait until Vuetify gets migrated to Vue 3. So yeah, we are blocked on this. And the second contact with migration was I have taken over a plugin, and then the first persons came to me and asked for Vue 3 support, and then I had to tackle TypeScript supporting with both libraries, and together with Vue Router. So I needed to jump into the new plugin TypeScript definitions, and they are not that fully typed as Vue 2. They are more the options is just an any object, and so. But now I have managed this, and currently I always release a Vue 3 version and then a tagged Vue -2 extra version. So I have I support two branches in parallel currently.
I think about the smaller issue with the types for the option for the plugin options. I think we have a pull request for this. I think Carlos, you're working on this, or you commented on it at least. I don't know.
Yes, we do have a fix for that. I'm not entirely sure if it was merged. We have a PR open that solves the issue with the options.
All right, I'll look into it.
And yeah, the more general question is like, I think we should probably collect a bunch of examples of different kinds of libraries that and how to maybe approach a migration, because there are libraries that are component libraries that are using like Vue files, and so for those you really need to do two different builds because the output is completely different because you generate different code. For other use cases where you're maybe like integrating some third-party library, like a chart library or something, you can, for example, use Vue Demi, which is a library that kind of enables to support Vue 2 and Vue 3 at the same time. When you only use a certain set of the APIs that Vue uses, and you don't actually use any Vue files. And so we have a bunch of different like kinds of libraries, and those have different requirements to be migrated. Like if you have a library that has actual components, then you practically have to maintain two branches, or you have to find a way to build for Vue 2 and build for Vue 3, and then have different files on the dist and the distribution. Whereas if you are mostly JavaScript based and just integrating some other kind of functionality, be it GraphQL or something, then you can probably make it work to have one code base or one build step that supports both. And so that's maybe an area worth exploring to come up with guidelines concerning that.
So currently in the plugin, I am heavily supporting TypeScript support. So I also write definitions for these, and also need to add a dev dependency on Vue Router next. So I'm not relying only on Vue, but also on Vue router. So there's a thing in the history in Vue router. Before in Vue router 3, it was just history base, and now it's in a nested object. So I need to support both versions. I can't just exchange the types because only of TypeScript. Yeah.
I was working at a larger enterprise up until recently, using both Vue CLI and Nuxt. And as part of that, we were looking at upgrading to Vue 3. The major blocker there was, of course, that Nuxt does not support Vue 3, which is coming, and I know that. The other major piece is, as an enterprise, they still heavily rely on Internet Explorer 11, unfortunately. Our application in particular was getting rendered inside of a desktop application. So there was a lot of complexity involved, and I get that. I was just wondering, from the Vue core team, what's the status on the compatibility build that supports IE11?
So to be honest, IE11 has been deprioritized quite a bit, mostly because we believe general Vue 2 to Vue 3 upgrade, the migration path, sans browser compatibility is a more important issue as of now. And mostly, I guess, as we were working on it, we started to notice, Microsoft officially declared IE11, they're stopping the support, and also the new mainstream browser landscape has changed a bit since Microsoft is now full on with Edge, which is now Chromium based. So, imagine in a year or two, most of the consumer facing browser landscape would be mostly modern. So we're quite optimistic on that, which is why we deprioritize IE11 support. But that doesn't mean we don't understand the scenario, because we know the reason why some enterprise still needs IE11 support is because they have, physical devices that are stuck with IE11. It's not really, so these are different categories of projects. Like, we understand that there are, end consumer facing products where users are probably on a relatively new device and they have the option to change their browser if they want to. Whereas we know there are a bunch of enterprise products or applications that just have to be run inside some predetermined environments where, IE11 is still kind of a hard requirement. So this is still something we will tackle. It's just, it will definitely happen after we tackle the general Vue 2 to 3 migration path first. But the theoretical path, like how we gonna do that, we've already sort of thought about it quite a bit. And so we can, essentially the technical direction we've already thought about. It's just the actual implementation is deprioritized until we figure out the main migration first. Yeah, and also a good point is another reason we deprioritize this is if you need IE11 support, Vue 2 still works, right? Vue 2, it's not like you're, with composition API plugin, you're not missing out too much, except for, performance. And, you're obviously going to miss out on future features. But if you're building for legacy systems, you probably don't want something super fancy. I mean, Vue 2 will still be able to fulfill most of the typical use cases that you're going to address on that kind of systems. So, which is why, another reason we're deprioritizing it, so eventually we do want to still take another look at this, but for now, it's not a high priority thing.
That makes a lot of sense. And in the chat, people have been commenting that their libraries going forward will not be supporting IE11 as well. So I think this is the trend in the web sphere. Just wanted to ask while we had the opportunity.
Yeah, I think I also work in enterprise, and we finally made the jump to drop IE11 for our internal use cases like 3 months ago, and that was big reason to celebrate. And I think even though there are these use cases that Evan mentioned that are pretty hard to migrate, right? Because they are kind of locked into some hardware or something. In general terms, the community or the ecosystem of JavaScript as a whole is recently gaining even more momentum to invest into the modern platform, right? And the question is, in these kinds of situations, is always which projects or which parts of the community or the ecosystem take the role of making decisions in a way, or making putting some flocks into the ground and say, okay, we realize we have to support something until a certain point, but we also have to kind of force the world to move on as in a certain way, because when everybody is willing to support everything back to IE11 or IE6 or 9 or whatever, then nothing will ever change. So in some areas, it's great actually. I think that some libraries are also saying, yeah, we're dropping IE11 because now it feels like it's a good time to do so. And so maybe that will inevitably lead to some pain in the kinds of environments that rely on IE11, but eventually, hopefully, that pain will bubble up to the people deciding or being able or having the power to decide to drop IE11 in their environment or in their enterprise. And eventually that will happen. But there will, of course, be some pain involved. And I'm not talking about Vue specifically, but the ecosystem as a whole. You can always also see it in other projects who are not willing to be backwards compatible anymore. And so it's kind of it's a scenario where you both have a carrot and a stick. Yeah, you have fancy features and performance, and also it's not working. So you have to move on, or the landscape of libraries that you can use, even outside of Vue, it's getting smaller and smaller because they are not compatible anymore.
Well, I think personally that's the reason why it's important to move on. Supporting IE11 at this point is kind of it's like a distraction for the newer technology. We have Vue 2 and, for example, Vuetify 2, very tried and true over the years, have worked through the mistakes, have worked through the issues, excuse me, and they're solid, at least as solid as they can be in their current status. But then trying to add this additional support on, to me, almost seems like monkey patching, just trying to, accommodate a small portion of users, because the idea is obviously you want to be as inclusive as possible. But I think there's also a point to where, again, when you're going to set out to work on a project, if it's new, then just like with anything else, you're going to evaluate your technical stack. And this would kind of go into that evaluation. Something that we actually plan on doing in the Vuetify docs is kind of saying, hey, there are things like older Safari and IE11 that we won't support, but that's why this version 2.0 is a stable long-term support version, because it's already done all the things to make sure that it works in IE11. And while we're not removing intentionally some things from the framework as we go to version 3, unless it makes sense, there are some functionality and features such as CSS variables, which are just, it would create a distraction to try to support these older technologies. So that's kind of, and I'm pretty stubborn. So usually whenever I work on things, especially when I started Beautify, I just do the newest stuff and I don't care about supporting the old things, and usually just kind of pave away that. And we just decided, hey, IE11 support, we would look at it in the future if it was something like a team member wanted to create and maintain some sort of add-on package. That could be a thing, but it would never be a priority for the team, just to keep the focus on moving the community forward. You don't want to keep pumping blood into IE11 unless you have to. And if you're making a new project in 2021 where IE11 is your target market, you're already making tons of considerations anyways that would be outside of the box, and you wouldn't be expecting to look at the latest and greatest technology for anything. So anyways, it's kind of my 2 cents on it.
Guys, as I do loads of consultancy, all Vue related, and until now, my answer was always, so IE11 may be coming next year. If you are on it, you have to wait. Probably it's good for the community to be aware that Vue 3, because of so many contributors not adopting Vue 11, probably we just need to change the tone of voice. We just need to make people aware that if you do want to use the composition API, you'll better just take the plugin that is available in the Vue 2. So just because I was aware and probably waiting, probably just, it's okay to change and move on. I think it's time as well. It just makes sure, because lots of people are waiting for the 11. If we say that it's coming, it's probably better to say, guys, it may really not come. It's much easier than say, oh, wait a minute, it's coming. Just a personal thought.
I think it's also worth mentioning about Vue 2.7 as well. So we're currently planning what to include in Vue 2.7. Nothing is fixed yet. But for example, if we're going to add composition API to Vue 2.7, not as a plugin, but built in as a core, then it might be possible that Vue 2.7 is enough for the IE11 support, right? And even we have IE11 compat build for Vue 3, for the enterprise users, it's going to be so hard to migrate Vue 3 anyway, because their Vue 2 code base is too huge, not because Vue 3 is not supporting IE11. So in that case, we still have to support Vue 2 for long term, as Beautify is going to support Vue 2 as a long-term support, right? So maybe that's one thing we should also consider. What about Vue 2.7? Maybe you could say, for IE11, use Vue 2.7. We have composition API, and maybe we're going to have even more cool stuff that can be backported from Vue 3. So yeah, that's, I think, another thing to think about it with this problem.
A pain point for Quasar with the migration, just to change a bit the topic, was SSR, actually. We had some problems since, if I understood correctly, many things which enabled SSR in Vue 2 has been stripped off from core. And so we're just waiting a bit on the core team to fix some bugs, and I think we will ship with SSR. But yeah, that was a major pain problem when doing the Vue 3 migration.
So we've all collectively decided IE11 dies today. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? Like, if it happens,
Down with IE.
Right? No one's going to support it officially. We're just going to say, hey, look, move on. It's 2021. We've already made it through COVID. IE11 can't last anymore either. So
let's do it, John. Let's do it.
As soon as we clean that button, the leave meeting, as soon as the meeting finish, no more talk about 11. Okay, IE11 that dies with us.
I do the Thanos move and all the IE11 applications disappear.
Yeah. So I really like the idea of focusing on making 2.7 good enough so that major legacy code bases stuck on V2 can enjoy some of the new features, retain IE11 compatibility without having to go through this major migration pain. So I think that is a good point. But you know, in all seriousness, if we want to, you know, communicate this plan, there's definitely going to be a formal process involved. We need an RFC. We need to get people's feedback. We need to discuss this. But yes, I think a lot of points made here do make sense, and I also agree that, you know, having to support IE11 in Vue 3 does create a ton of complexity, which will probably, you know, so given our, you know, limited bandwidth, if we want to deal with IE11, is it better to invest it into Vue 3, where maybe a large chunk of Vue 2 users can't migrate to in the first place? Or should we invest it into making 2.7 as close to feature parity with V3 as possible, so that, you know, existing users can get what they want without having to, you know, jump through the hoops? So I think these are really, really good points, and we should, you know, outline this in a, you know, in a document, so that, you know, as a formal RFC for the community to discuss this, because I think yes, I agree. The points raised that we've been saying, yes, we plan to do it. Yes, we plan to do it. But, you know, it's been deprioritized over time. And, you know, actually during this time of delaying it, we're also seeing how Microsoft stance changed, how more and more companies stance changed. So I think, and on a positive note, if we drop IE11 for Vue 3, it could also be a major, you know, at this point, I believe we have some sort of responsibility for pushing the ecosystem forward to some point. And, you know, dropping IE11 may make, you know, make Vue 3 unsuitable for certain categories of use cases. But we, as we discussed, we can cover that part with 2.7, so that users overall don't lose out as much. And at the same time, we essentially encourage all new projects adopting Vue 3 to drop IE11 support. And I think that's overall probably doing a good thing for the whole web ecosystem. So yes, this is something we should consider opening a formal RFC for. And I'm glad to hear these points being raised here.
So then the approach would be, like you're saying, RFC, kind of put the focus on Vue 3, especially with Vite, not happening to focus on this legacy implementation. Then not only does it allow the progress of that to happen faster, that's why I do it in Vuetify. I'm not trying to slow down to, so I mean, like I said, there's a tried and true thing that exists there, but then that allows you to, even if you have kind of the team somewhat split, where you're providing progress and some maintenance on version 2.7, and that just allows anyone that you bring in to help contribute to not have to focus on these legacy implementations, and can, you know, especially the younger generation that is more fluent in the newer technologies, it improve the ability to contribute. It's one thing we've been focusing on in Vuetify, is because, you know, render functions are great, but it is so hard to get people to be able to contribute. So, you know, kind of approaching from the standpoint of, okay, what is the best overall approach for everyone? Like you said, that Vue has a kind of almost like an obligation. I don't think it's out of line to say, hey, this is the newest version, and that probably there's a subset of people that are in a scenario where upgrading to version 3 is a priority to them, and they still want to have that IE11 support. But I think it's kind of one of those things where you can't make everybody happy, and that at the end of the day, you know, people are going to say what they want to do. I'm sure you're going to throw up a poll or an RFC, but I believe it would be good in the direction of setting the example for the industry of, hey, it's time to move on, you know.
Yeah, what we probably should do if we go that route of 2.7 being the version for IE11, is as I mentioned earlier, like we should at least have a decent idea about how as many libraries as possible can continue to support both versions. So like I explained, some have probably, for some it's not worth it, because like Vuetify, if you're mainly building components and many components, then making them compatible for both versions is pretty much impossible. But if you are maintaining a library that is mainly extending or adding JavaScript-based functionality to components, then you probably have a pretty good chance of building a library that supports both to a certain extent. But you probably need some guidance for this, right? And you have to restrict yourself to maybe not use a certain API, or you have to be aware that you have to use the set function to add or to change it, to mutate an array instead of relying on the view. So that's maybe something that would be beneficial, at least to allow the part of the ecosystem that still would build on 2.7 to not get totally outdated.
So which is why I think the composition API plugin and projects like Vudemy are extremely important, because these two combined essentially allows you to write portable, reusable logic that works the same way in Vue 2 and Vue 3. Some of the edge cases that you mentioned about the proxy new property detection and array indices, that would not work in the Vue 2.x composition API. We can actually detect such usage in the proxy-based version and throw warnings for them, so that essentially we say we can provide, say, a runtime flag that you enable saying enforce Vue 2 compatibility, so that when you add a new property and expect things to change, you will actually get a warning saying, hey, this won't actually work if your library intend to support Vue 2. So I think that's a really good point to think about. And I think as for community guidance, I think a good general idea is to, if you're shipping reusable logic in your library, you should probably write with composition API. Then actually, if you stick to pure composition API, then the end user can already sort of composition and Vudemy will probably be able to cover a good chunk of use cases. And then outside of that, it's really just minor. We probably need a bit more data points, but I think anything that's previously a mixing, if you refactor it into a, pure standard composition API usage without too many hacks, you should probably be able to just support Vue 2 and Vue 3 at the same time.
I think Christopher raised a point about TypeScript and types. So, like if I build a library with types, I can generate them for the Vue 3 library, but I have to write them manually for Vue 2, and I don't think we have a good. At least I don't have a good idea to provide conditional typings that you consume in Vue 2 versus Vue 3, and they won't be compatible for everything. At least for plugin APIs or something.
Would it be possible to?
So if you use Vudemy, an import, it hot swaps the version. So if it is Vue 2, it's going to use the Vue composition API types. Vue 3, it's going to use the Vue 3 types.
Yeah, the composition API types, but I'm not sure that there are other API types, general API types, like the plugin options or the first argument of the plugin function that is like an app versus the Vue constructor. Little stuff like that would not be compatible in terms of types.
I think what Thorsten is talking about is what types should the library ship, right? Because by default, you'd be shipping the library's types will be based on Vue. It will be importing Vue 3 types, and it won't be incompatible with the composition API package, the plugin types. So yeah, that is a good thing to think about. So, but I think the general direction, at least the runtime behavior, it should just work, right? So I think that's a good first step, and we can work on a proper guidance. Let's just say take one of our some libraries some of us are working on, and try to just make it as seamlessly support Vue 2 and Vue 3 as possible, and then figure out the best practices from there. And then provide it to the community as guidance. I think that would be a good project.
One way.
In Quasar, sorry.
Oh, thank you. On the 2.7, we could align the types for the Vue 3 within the Vue. And that would also make it a bit easier, although with the 2.7, that would make a breaking change on the types. So
well, if we pull composition API into Vue 2 core, we can actually then directly import the types from @Vue/reactivity. That way they are, so we are essentially pulling @Vue/reactivity as a type-only dependency for 2.7, so that 2.7 and Vue 3 will be actually sharing the same underlying reactivity types. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the reactivity package is not that big of a problem once we integrate it into 2.7, but I'm more thinking about things like you could probably write a directive that is runtime compatible in both versions by simply having a wrapper that translates the hook names for the directive, for the custom directives between 2 and 3 for most use cases, but I don't think that the types would line up between Vue 2 and Vue 3 for a custom directive and the function.
No, directives probably won't. Yeah, we're talking about just.
I think there are a lot of these little things, like you have a plugin function, and the first argument of a plugin function is the Vue constructor in Vue 2, and it's the app instance in Vue 3, and so
yeah,
you would have
but I think the major pain will be in. I think the majority of libraries that aim to be Vue 3 and Vue 2 compatible will be writing composition API code. And most of the type incompatibility pain points will lie in these reactive objects, refs, and all that. If we can handle that part inside 2.7, then we already alleviate a lot of the issues. You know, for directive types or plugin types, you know, say if you ship a pretty complex thing with composition functions, a directive, and a plugin, with compatible reactivity types, then the only thing you need to manually shim for Vue 2 are the directive types and the plugin types, which in my opinion is a lot more trivial compared to shimming all the composition API types, right?
Yeah,
you can just, I mean, you can just like any the second argument and call it a day. Since the plugin install step isn't really a significant
part that could be a solution. So that could be like the trade-offs to like, but that is something that should be like documented in some best practices for compatible plugins. That's the type of stuff that we have to come up when we do what you propose, like take one of the libraries and just follow through with it.
I'd like to add something. So I've been thinking about this thing recently, and the way I thought is like, instead of having one package, you can have a monorepo where you have two versions of same package, which like one package for Vue 2 and one package for Vue 3. And you can extract most of the common functionality, which is shared between these two packages, into a third package. That way you can ship two versions and like you can still share code between these two. So you can have like 2.x series of versions for Vue 2 and 3.x series for of same package for Vue 3, and still share lots of code between this. So instead of trying to have same thing. You can have like small wrappers and extract out all the core logic into a separate package.
In Quasar, we had a similar problem because having a lot of integration, we don't want all the types to be available all the time. So like Electron, Cordova, and whatever types, they're added only when the related mode is added. And we solved it with some kind of flag system. So TypeScript checks, does a conditional check on an object, which is a type, and using the global interface merging, you can define flags, actually. It's a bit dirty because you have to provide some kind of a shim file, but it's, well, it worked well until now for the past year for us, so that could be a solution. A flag makes you switch from Vue 3 types to Vue 2.
I shared 2 links in the chat. So I have the problem, besides the fact that Vue Router has a breaking change I'm relying on. I have a peer dependency to Vue because it's a plugin for Vue. So in the Vue 2 branch, I have a peer dependency on Vue 2, and in the master branch, I have a peer dependency on Vue 3. So different types wouldn't really help me here because I need the peer dependency anyways. And so I don't really see an option how this could be solved in any way. So I think I need to live with it with this 2 branches and versionings, and just hope that Vue 3 gets so much popular that I can deprecate the Vue 2 branch, and then that's it. And then I hope that Vue 4 doesn't have so much other changes in the plugin system.
So in regards to that, I just posted my library that I have support within just a single package. I have support for both Vue 2 and Vue 3. So basically, I have like a file with API, and the API, it got TS, exposes the Vue types or the Vue 3 types. And when the package gets installed, it auto swaps for if the Vue 2 is installed, it installs the Vue 2 version of the types. Otherwise, it uses the Vue 3. So this way, you don't need to have 2 branches that implements the Vue or Vue 3. But of course, this library is purely a composition API, so it depends. So there are some situations that this is not possible. But for most cases, you could just override and create a third type to create as a proxy between the Vue 2 and the Vue 3 types, and you use that one. And depending on your API file, it will just override the types that you need. If you need help, you can reach me out on Discord. I can help you out a bit if you need.
Yeah, my Discord handle is in the chat already. Yeah, the other problem I would see is that if I support Vue 2 and Vue 3 in the same branch, I would need a lot of if-else branches in the code itself. So it's not really heavy, but it could affect runtime performance and so on. Yeah, in the plugin, it's not a problem.
You can use the process.env to validate which which build. So basically how it works is you build for Vue 2 and Vue 3, and at install, on the post install of the package, you hot swap to the version that you want. So there's no runtime performance in there because it all at the build time. You just need to build twice.
Yeah.
Ooh, a wild Eduardo appeared.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, he's got wine.
Yeah, he upgraded. We just have beer.
That's
I have
such
to
a
have
French
wine.
thing to do.
Yeah, right. I'm also in Strasbourg right now, so I'm having red instead of white, but it's okay.
Why not?
Yeah, so Tracy just wrote in the chat that it's now time for a Vue and TypeScript, and I think we are already knee-deep into it, so I think we can just continue, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we have about 20 more minutes on this topic and other relevant topics related to this, and then another bathroom break / wine break and beer break.
Yeah, I think it's a great, Evan. Oh, you want to go, Torsten?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, because Evan had brought up around like the TypeScript tooling, because obviously we have Viter, we have VDX, and I actually just learned about Volar this morning. So is that something you want to talk about in this section, Evan? Just because it is involved with like the TypeScript experience with Vue.
Since one of the major things, so Vue 3 core, we know it's reinterment with TypeScript. We have pretty comprehensive, pretty advanced type support, actually. We also have TSX supporting Vue 3 as well. One of the things for a very long time that people have wanted is to have good, TSX-like dev experience while using templates. So Vader has shipped this interpolation checks for a while now, and also, but Vader has grown pretty complicated and big over the time. And when we were proposing the say new RFCs like script setup and the ref sugar, some of the biggest concerns or biggest concerns about whether these RFCs should be introduced are how feasible it is for the IDE to support them, because people are obviously concerned, like say you don't even have proper template in type checks for the current syntax, and now you're introducing more new syntax. How would you handle that? And I think so Volar has essentially provided a good, a good reason for us to say, okay, maybe IDE support is actually feasible, because someone has already built them. So Volar provides pretty fast and accurate type check for template expressions, combined with script setup, and even supports converting back and forth between the ref sugar syntaxes. So when you use script setup with TypeScript with Volar, it's actually a very, 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 very smooth development experience. I would say almost on par with TSX now. So this is something I'm kind of thinking, because obviously we've also had explorations in Viter. Rahul's been working on VDX, and there have been, work on integration, like figuring out how VDX would work with Viter, or how, and now Volar just introduced something like its own TS plugin. So I think it's good that we have a lot of explorations and improvements made in these fronts, but also for an end user, it could be a bit confusing, because now they are faced with problem when they start a new project, like which extension should I use? Should I use VueDX or not? So I think it's good for us to just sit down and think about this so that we can. I also don't, like obviously we've invested a lot of development efforts into Viter. Viter has its own ecosystem almost because it has some conventions like component props information that can be extracted for libraries. So I'm trying to figure out what is the best way forward for us to, the common goal here is to provide the best possible IDE experience when you're working with Vue and especially with single file components. And how can we combine these efforts that's currently a bit scattered across Viter, VueDX, and Volar, and give this one clear path for new users saying this is the recommendation, and if you use this, you will get the best possible DX when working with Vue.
One thing I want to add here is, and maybe that's not that big of a question, but it's one that I have is, personally, I don't use anything but Visual Studio Code, but I know there are a lot of people that are building Laravel applications in PHP Storm or other IDEs. And a lot of these IDEs, they also use like a TypeScript server, language server. So they probably can reuse some of that functionality, but all of the tooling that we have so far is mostly primarily built for VS Code. So we shouldn't forget that there is probably a large sector of the ecosystem or the developers in the community that are using other IDEs. And for them, the question is kind of another level because they say, I can't use this VS Code extension. I can't use the other VS Code extension because I'm on another IDE. So the question of support, IDE support, is a little bit bigger even when you step out of the JavaScript developer zone that is consolidated on VS Code.
So people have already been pointed it out in chat. I think both Viter and Volar are built on top of the language server protocol. So LSP is pretty universal in today's IDE landscape. I believe you can pretty much bridge a standard LSP based implementation into a lot. I would definitely wouldn't say all, but a lot of these you can bridge, and they either have native support for LSP or you can bridge into it some way. So I would like to see this obviously as well, but so I would say VS Code at this point is obviously going to be the recommended IDE, but yes, we in an ideal situation, we want to be able to reuse as much as from these projects as possible and be able to offer them as standard language servers that can be used in other IDEs as well.
Yeah, I think my perception was that it's probably possible to really reuse a lot of this, but just speaking from a personal perspective, the whole conversation is happening around VS Code extensions, and so for an outsider looking in, it could quickly appear to be like, oh, so I have to use VS Code to have this kind of support. Like, not everyone is like understanding how to maybe bridge or include the underlying implementations.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think
I'm happy to hear that it's probably possible, but
sorry. So Volar and VueDX, they are both implemented as TypeScript extensions. So wherever there is TypeScript support, they already can support Vue. So they are not like the core functionality in both Volar and VueDX is implemented as TS plugins. And I have tested VueDX in Vim and a little bit in Sublime. So they fit well in existing TypeScript ecosystems. So if IDE support TypeScript, there are chances like TS plugin would directly work with it and provide all the features for you. And I have like earlier I experimented VLS. Problem with VLS is segmentation. So when we use VLS to provide Vue features, we create two segments. One is TypeScript world and one is Vue world. And there are problems at the point of intersection, like you are importing a Vue file and a TypeScript file. At that point, VLS, the language server protocol becomes a little bit difficult to support. Support features where there's cross between Vue and TypeScript. So TS plugin seems like it's the way forward, and it can support more than just VS Code.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In regards to that, you still don't have the support for the single file components. That's one of the major issues on the IDEs. So the TypeScript side with Vue 2, it works fine and perfectly now. But the problem is the IDE doesn't know how to read Vue files. And that's quite difficult for us to provide that functionality. With a TypeScript plugin, you can do it somewhat, but you don't get the same experience as you have like a full ARM extension like VueDX, V2 or Volar. So I'm not entirely sure what we can do that in that case.
Yeah, it's a combination of multiple aspects. Like one, I think it's going to be a very difficult task if we say we are going to provide the same level of support in all possible IDEs. I don't think that's possible. Like we have to have some priority. We have to, focus on one thing that gives us the best tools to provide the best DX possible, and then we think about what we can extract and reuse in other places. The other hand is, as mentioned, there's this IDE aspect, and there's this generic TS integration aspect. The IDE aspect is like when you load up a project containing TypeScript and Vue single file components, can they work seamless together? Can you refactor across them? Can you find references? Can you say get proper type inference on all these imported stuff in single file components, even in templates, right? And the other aspect of this is when you are building something, when you're running the build, can you do a one-pass type check that would check both TS files and single file Vue components? So this is a more generic TypeScript workflow where you just running things from the command line, but you expect Vue files to be treated seamlessly as part of the whole TypeScript project instead of something that lives outside of it. And obviously, so the reason why I think I want to discuss this is I want to take a step back and to make sure we align this high level vision where the priority is given so say we recommend a given IDE, what is the best possible DX we can provide out of it for an end user? And the obvious answer is use this IDE, install this extension, and you're set. Right? We don't want to say, here's how you can get this working by first try this one. If it doesn't work for you, then try this one. Then you need to install this TS plugin to get this. Right? This is something I want to avoid because we kind of went through that in the Vue TS template, and it confuses the hell out of people. The other aspect of it is, this missing piece where on the command line, TypeScript users are used to just run TSC and expect all these errors to pop up. And in the previous template, we tried using VDS type check, but ran into some issues. Like it was throwing errors on vmodel usage, I believe. So we kind of had to temporarily disable that. But I think this is more like just implementation maturity or stability issue. So I hope what I hope is, we can essentially start a sub-working group inside Vue core team to figure out, if we were to achieve this end goal of having unambiguous recommendations on what the user should use, what are the steps that we need to do to jump there? What are the relative advantages and disadvantages of these current existing solutions? And how can we combine the both of them and overcome the shortcomings of them? How can we maybe we can combine them into one. Maybe we can figure out a even higher level package that put some of these together. I don't know, because I personally, haven't really dig into the technical details of these implementations. So, but I want to use this opportunity to sort of start this initiative for Rahul, Johnson, Yo-Yo, and Pine, who I don't think he is here, but for you guys to work together to figure this out. Because I feel like we are sort of, we are making some really exciting improvements, but they are kind of fragmented at this point, and we are maybe duplicating efforts. We are kind of wasting a bit of bandwidth in these parallel explorations at this point now. And I think it's time for us to kind of sort of converge back and figure out what's the best way to take all these things we've learned and put them back together into this one single coherent thing. That's just what I'm thinking. So, and I think that would be beneficial to Vue users because, yeah, right now, every time people ask me like, what should I use? It's a hard question to answer.
Yeah, it makes sense to converse them. And I think all three prototypes have are in stage where we see all the features can be implemented in each one of them. And more time we spend on them separately, they are diverging more.
Yeah.
Somebody pointed out in the chat that it's similar to TSLint being merged into ESLint and having a roadmap there. That would make a lot of sense if at some point things converged into a single tool, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. All right, so so I think we should probably just start a discussion on this in team discussions, and then we can sort of work from there.
It's like a perfect segue. Sorry, where are the team discussions? Like in Discord?
It's on GitHub. So
Okay.
we have an internal discussion for things that's still experimental.
So if anybody is listening out there on the internet, you guys can find it on GitHub to join in.
Oh, it's currently private because there are a lot of things that's kind of just like, what if this random idea thing, before we sort of think it through and then make it more polished and into formal RFCs. It's kind of a dumb place for stupid ideas.
Yeah. Where can people, like, if they want to kind of, they're listening to this conversation, kind of want to,
So if you have public ideas that want to discuss, just use the RFC repo. So the RFC repo, so if you send a pull request, it needs to be a very formal RFC, follow the format and everything. But the issue part, the discussion section in the RFC repo is essentially just, a place. It's not like a place where you just ask generic usage questions. It's for people who are involved, who want to just get more involved in, discussing like, should we add this? Should we do this? Should we do that?
Cool. Awesome. All right. Beer and wine time, or lunchtime for some of us, unless I have anything else to say before we
That's it. I'm hungry.
Okay, y'all. I'll put a little placeholder back and we'll be back at the 40 mark. So see you all in a second.
Cool. See you soon.
See ya.
Welcome back, everyone.
Is everyone back?
We're back.
Yeah.
I'm having a very strange meal, which I feel like encompasses like what Vue Contributor Days is. So I'm eating barbecue pork buns, you know, a very Chinese, Cantonese thing to eat. And then I'm eating a cheese plate. So
Good for you. Good for you.
All right. So our next topic is, God, Evan, this was a big one, right? Like tooling, V, lots of, you know, ad hoc topics, et cetera, and just general open discussion time kind of after that. So I'll let you kick it off.
Yeah. So this tooling actually was supposed to also cover a bit of the IDE stuff, but I think we already kind of talked about it. So yeah, I also went through what Vite was about, and yeah, so Vite is essentially I guess I don't have really specific things that I want to go into. I'm actually more interested in hearing more about how, I guess, from a user's perspective, or from as library authors or tooling authors who needs to integrate dev service and bundlers, what your thoughts are? What do you think? Where do you see the possible limitations or hurdles for adopting VR, and how? Yeah, I guess just general thoughts on how would Vite would affect the thing you're working on.
I am exceptionally excited for Vite. Don't know if that's a good phrase, whatever. I'm very excited for Vite. I love everything that it was trying to achieve. I love everything that it's doing right now. Last couple weeks, I've been playing with, not sure how to pronounce it, Vitis, which has been an excellent tool that's Nuxt-like with having pages and being able to render static assets for deployment. I'm really enjoy working with that. I really hope that, I know there's been talk about integrating Vite into the Vue CLI somehow so that you can build your application from scratch that way. I really hope something like that comes out of it so that developers in general can just have access to Vite as the default rather than having to choose it as an option. I think it's definitely the way forward for Vue developer experience, just being able to have that really nice developer environment to work with.
Yeah, I'll second that. It's been a real good experience using. I guess my major question or just point I want to bring up is, as someone who builds tools on top of the Vue CLI tools, has there been any discussion about like not like a compatibility layer, but like an extension layer, so that way if someone's using the older Webpack based build system, like I as a tool author can just say call Vue CLI serve and it knows which one to pick or which setup to use. Because right now Vue CLI service just calls the internal serve command, and that's all Webpack based. If I want to switch over to Vite or Vue, I have to hard code that into my tools.
So are you saying you have end users so you are building something that's on top of Vue CLI?
Right. So like it's the Ionic CLI, which when a user creates an Ionic Vue app and they run Ionic serve, it just proxies out and calls the Vue CLI service under the hood. So I guess we're the kind of, I don't know, no, I wouldn't say concerned, but just things that I want to figure out is where can the compatibility layer be?
So I guess from your tool's perspective, it's probably better to just say offer a Vite-based Vue setup as a different command or different integration altogether, I think that would be the better path. Most specifically, Vite is not Vue specific, so it's technically possible for, say, I don't know, but from what I understand, it should be possible for someone to use Vite and React and Ionic React, together.
I mean,
so
the only other workaround that I could think of is just calling npm scripts directly, whether that's using Yarn or npm directly, instead of having to call the tool itself and just appending all the flags and things that we want to customize through that mechanism.
Well, Vite has a pretty comprehensive JavaScript API. So from a tooling perspective, Vite is quite different from VCI in the sense that VCI itself is CLI first, and then it encompasses CLI service and all the like scaffolding, plugins system and all that. But Vite itself, Vite CLI is really just a very thin wrapper on top of its JavaScript API. Right? So if you're building something on top of Vite, you should just use just import create server from Vite and then run create server. That's like the most straightforward way to do it. So yeah, in terms of positioning, so we're also not quite sure like how VCI and Vite would converge in the future, because this is something sort of Vite itself is positioned to be framework agnostic, so it's possible there are different ways to think of this, right? So one way is we think of Vue CLI as just a brand name. So when we say like maybe we'll have a future version of the CLI that actually just uses Vite under the hood. So people, but I think it's more like a perception issue, right? Because then at that point you're really just using something different. But VCI has, by definition, has more in the sense that it handles its own plugin system. It has code generation, scaffolding, and a bunch of other things. Like we probably want to keep these so that the future version of this Vue CLI will probably make these code scaffolding parts. We extract them, refactor them into something that's more standalone, and then under the hood, it's really just spinning up a Vite app. That's one possible direction. So different abstraction layers, I would say. But for your use case, I would consider Ionic CLI to be on the same abstraction level with Vue CLI, right? In the future. So if you want to say provide a Vite plus Vue integration in Ionic CLI, you would be essentially doing the same thing what a future version of Vue CLI will be doing. So that's how I think of it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess I'll throw my question back in. Would it be possible to, when you're starting up a Vue CLI application, would it be possible as one of the steps to choose whether you want Webpack or Vite as what you want to scaffold out?
I'm not sure actually, because I feel like the question is there something in the current Webpack-based CLI setup that people would absolutely need, or should we just, use scaffold? I don't want people to have to choose a bundler on dev server when they're using Vue CLI, because that's Vue CLI is supposed to be giving you this very opinionated, pre-configured setup already. But
I guess this is one of the examples I have in my head of when Vue CLI plus Vite might be convenient. Whether or not it's feasible or not, I don't know. But let's say I need to create a new Vue application, and for some reason I'm not choosing something like Quasar. I want to use Vite, and eventually I also want to install an Electron plugin. Right now, it's extremely convenient with Vue CLI. There's a couple different Electron plugins that I can just install. Same thing is true if I want to add TypeScript support, and the Vue CLI plugin for TypeScript automatically converts all of my JS files into TS files and does a whole bunch of other stuff. It would be really nice if I could use Vite and I could have that kind of plugin ecosystem that exists in the Vue CLI.
The challenge here is the Vue CLI plugins are coupled to Webpack, current implementation, right? A lot of these plugins would inject their own Webpack specific configurations and assume a lot of things that may be Webpack specific. So the problem, the potential issue, if we were to say have both Vite and Webpack as options in Vue CLI, is that now you suddenly have a bunch of Vue CLI plugins that would work if you use Webpack, but would not work if you use Vite. And I think that's kind of a confusing scenario that we will kind of want to avoid, which is why currently we're sort of keeping the two paths really separate, so there's little confusion. A Vite plugin is a Vite plugin, and a Vue CLI plugin is just a Vue CLI plugin. But if we were to say, so obviously there are things that people like about the Vue CLI plugin is that it can update your code, scaffold new code, so that when you add something, it just like, it's not like a manual process. It feels like a plugin can do more than just providing functionality. It's like, I think that's the core value that a lot of people like in Vue CLI plugin is this like code transformation and scaffolding functionality. But I think we should probably, the problem is the current CLI plugin are most of them, I believe, would also use this sort of how to tweak the configuration. They're using chain Webpack, and it's Webpack specific. There's no way these plugins would work with Vite. So I could imagine so let's forget about branding for a second and just imagine if we want this kind of scaffolding and code generation, code transformation functionalities, but we also want the Vite dev server, we want fast Vite startup times. So, you can imagine putting this sort of, essentially extracting the code scaffolding and transformation parts from Vue CLI, make it bundler agnostic, and then combine that with Vite. I would imagine that's something, it could be either the next generation of Vue CLI, but at that point, we are essentially also creating this sort of, all your previous Vue CLI plugins no longer work with the latest version of Vue CLI, right? So, which is, I'm not 100% sure if that should be the case, It feels like it's almost easier to start with this clean slate, maybe something like a Vite CLI enhancer that just brings in code scaffolding capabilities to Vite instead of shoehorning all the Vue CLI idioms onto it. This is kind of open-ended at this point. But I do see there are potential issues if, because how coupled to Webpack this current Vue CLI plugin ecosystem is. So maybe we want some more data points, look at some of the popular Vue CLI plugins, some of the things that you think that are most useful, look at the source code, see how coupled to Webpack it is and how easy it is to make it into something that can work with both Vite and Webpack. If that's, if turns out it's relatively easy to do that, then, maybe it's not that big of a deal. you just sort of, maybe all these plugins need to do in the future is to say, if you're using Webpack, I'm gonna use this configuration. If you're using Vite, I'm just gonna inject this Vite plugin, and that's it. So yeah, we'll definitely need to put more thought into this, but I think what I know for sure from this is the scaffolding part of VCI is probably the most valuable thing outside of just the dev server and bundling capabilities.
I know in Nuxt we're trying to, or at least Puya, I don't know if Puya is listening and can jump in, but trying to add Vite in kind of like development mode, but still have Webpack because we need that for performance and for the production mode, but that you can choose in the development mode to have that running and kind of have this hybrid kind of thing going on. That's what we're working on at the moment for Nuxt 3.
Well, it's actually kind of true. We will support two top-level options for Webpack and Vite, and we have the same problem. Because Next modules are kind of similar to Vue CLI plugins, and they need to consider some conditions for extending Webpack configuration or Vite. Something I'm hopeful is that we have some decoupled configurations, like they are top level, they are not related to essentially Webpack. So for user side, probably migration would be easier. Just module others should be careful about handling different stuff between Webpack and Vite. And the path that we are going is to create some utilities for module others. I think Vue CLI can do the same. So using these utilities, we can easily create probably plugins that work between both rollup, convention, and Webpack one.
Sorry, was that a question for me?
No, it was just the direction that we're going. Okay. And I think the thing that you are doing is pretty good for bringing a scaffolding tool with instead of like having two tools doing the same thing.
Yeah, and another aspect of it is there are some tools that sole purpose is to scaffold stuff. I know like Plop or some other node packages that they're Hygiene or some other packages, right? I think some users might just use this combined with Vite to do their own thing. But I guess the advantage of VCI plugins is because people are comfortable knowing that if you go down this path, you add this plugin, you get this functionality. So I guess it's how much of that we want to be able to leverage. So VCI, what VCI means is essentially the default recommended tooling for Vue projects. And when people go down that path, what VCI plugins give them is knowing that if I choose this tooling path, then I have all these things at my disposal. So, and I still think that's valuable. So, which is why it's at some point we should consider like it's either VCI with Vite under the hood, then you still have plugins, and these plugins need to be explicit about are they supporting the Webpack-based version, or are they supporting the Vite-based version? And then on the other hand, we could either say instead of VCI, here's this official, maybe a rebrand term, name is something else, but it's Vite-based, or we just recommend Vite plus some scaffolding tool out of the box. I think these are all possible solutions, but we need to think a bit more about what would be the most ideal path forward, considering both what it would mean for existing users, what it mean for new users, what it mean for current CLI plugins, and how much of that we can leverage and reuse in the new Vue-based tooling.
Yeah, another point that I see concerning like Vue CLI plugins and the lessons that we learned from them is they provide a lot of convenience to a certain extent, but at the same time the complete package that we are maintaining with all of the core plugins for unit testing, for example, and stuff like that, also has proven to be a kind of a maintenance burden, and it's also proven to be finicky when it comes to versioning, because we have we kind of lost the last two versions of Jest. We were still on 23 or 24 when they went to 26, because according to Semver, we would have to release a new major version to actually upgrade the dependencies. And just because it's such a complete package, it also comes with the downside of having to actually maintain all of these sub dependencies and their major releases in your own major release cycle. And so what I've been asking myself, like I haven't thought in depth about it. What I've been asking myself is maybe the scope of Vue CLI is a bit too broad, or are there other strategies about how to approach adding functionality to a project? Because I think what Vue is getting mostly right until now is that it's focusing on the actual code and building and experience. And I still have to add Jest manually so far. I have to add ESLint manually so far. But if you have done this a couple of times, it's pretty straightforward, I guess. It's a bit of adding a couple packages and copying a bunch of configuration files from your copy and paste folder that everyone has, I guess. and so I'm just thinking out loud about how there may be a kind of a point where you add too much complexity and you get too slow or too heavy.
Yeah, that's so to be honest, that's one of the things why Soda has to work on it full time, because the scope is so large, right?
Yeah. So big props for that, by the way.
Yeah, it's definitely a very challenging thing to manage with all these integration points, which is why I think at some point I do want to consider reducing the scope of VCLI. Maybe Vue could be an opportunity for us to sort of reconsider, like, should we go this all-encompassing route that the current VCLI is going, or maybe we can sort of loosen things a bit so that, not just that we reduce the maintenance surface, but also maybe some of this could be delegated to the ecosystem. Some of this could be, if they are not have to be maintained as an official plugin, maybe the integration itself could be simplified to a certain extent. I mean, I imagine the way test runners and a lot of the stuff that integrates Vue would be, they are essentially different integrations in the first place. So if we were to provide those integrations, what would be, how can we take all these things we've learned over the years maintaining Vue CLI and, maybe think of a better way to do it? That doesn't sort of lock us into this having to keep everything up to date all at the same time sort of situation.
Yeah, so I think the only major huge downside of Vite is that when you get used to using Vite, it makes your current Vue 2 project work really painful because it's so slow. And before I went into contributing to ViteFresh, I wasn't using Vite so much, so I didn't realize that current Vue 2 project is so slow, right? So it was normal for me. But once you really dive into Vite, your current day job project becomes so painful. So do we have any good plan for supporting Vue 2 app with Vite, like natively?
I mean, Underthing works on that. He maintains
Oh.
the Vue 2 plugin. So Vite plugin Vue 2, it already works. I mean, Underthing is a core team member too, so I trust he knows what he's doing. I mean, I haven't looked into the plugin, but from what I can tell, most of the logic is actually shared between the V2 plugin, V3 plugin. It's just like using different underlying template compilers and all that. So you should try it out. Yeah.
Great, great.
Maybe we should add a Vue 2 template into the VJS app.
Yeah, that would be really great.
Yeah. All right. So I guess so I think we can just go on with ad hoc topics. If anyone still have questions or like thoughts about it, we can keep talking about it. Or if you just have random things that you want to raise a new topic, I think we can just discuss whatever we want.
I think you're doing a great job on it, Evan, so well done.
Thank you.
I haven't tried it yet because I saw an issue on GitHub. It's already closed, where it points out that Vite doesn't check TypeScript at build time. So that's because it's so fast, I think. And I think there's an option with plugins to enable all of this again, but then it's, I think, slow again. And personally, in my project at work, we are using TS name off. It's a plugin for TypeScript to support something like the name of in C#. And so I can extract names of variables and TypeScript interfaces with this. And I think I already has a small complex setup in Webpack for this. And like I said, I hadn't tried it yet, but I think it doesn't support such a plugin.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, running TypeScript diagnostics during dev is somewhat wasteful because most of the time you already get instant feedback in your IDE.
Yeah, that's the philosophy behind Vite.
Yeah, but if you're doing build, I mean, by default, Vite's build also uses ES build for transform, so it doesn't do type check either. But you can do a separate TSC -- no emit. So essentially, just use TSC for type checking, but let Vite do the code transformation.
Yeah, but for that, that wouldn't check view files, right? Because
which is something we talked about earlier. It's a missing piece that we need to tackle.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just to mention, Vuedx has a CLI that type checks the project all TypeScript and Vue files.
Yeah. So Feeder also has a VTI command line tool, which you can run VTI diagnostics. It'll print all the diagnostics as if you were to use Feeder to check the file. yeah, again, this is currently still fragmented, and we want to eventually consolidate them into this maybe @view/check, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
Something like that.
Yeah. So currently the front end I'm working on with 80 pack files and many I think 120 or more TypeScript files is starting in around 30 to 40 seconds, but then it's a hot module reloading, and from if it booted up in this amount of seconds, it's like nothing. So it's fast, and I don't have any such pains in terms of speed while working.
How long does it take the HMR to update?
Again,
How
please?
long does it take to hot update when you save the file?
500 milliseconds.
Okay, that's not bad. That's not bad. Yeah. Yeah. So I think in pure TS files, it's actually been pretty reasonable, but I've noticed that it has to do with some plugins. Like in some developers' setups, their Webpack plugins invalidate more modules than it should probably, which causes hot updates to just deteriorate quite significantly. Yeah, so essentially with Vite, the guarantee is hot updates will always only invalidate the minimum number of modules that needs to be updated. So let's say you have like 500 TS files in your project. Maybe with Webpack, your hot module replacement now takes 1 second, 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But in Vite, the number of total files is irrelevant. It's almost always going to be 100 milliseconds updates. That's the main difference, and it kind of only shows when you have a project with a huge scale. But still, it's still a pretty significant thing because we've heard some users with big Vue apps, like they have to wait like 3 to 4 seconds for something to update. I know like Angular users have experienced that too, probably. So yeah, so I think consistently fast hot module replacement is also going to be pretty good. Especially the biggest problem is in some cases, you can't fix a project that has too many files. You can't just say, I don't want these files, right?
Yeah.
So it's good to be able to just decouple the total number, the size of your project from the development feedback speed.
Or to be short, be happy that your project doesn't have this problem yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it might have it later when it's grown.
It also startup time is also kind of a thing. Like if I have a project that always takes more than 10 seconds to start the server, I would be very reluctant to work on it, to be honest. Like that's one of the things every time people send me a reproduction that's like, it's a whole Vue CLI app, I'm like, oh, now I have to like install Vue CLI again and then start the server. But now with Vite, it's the whole reproduction workflow is also greatly improved because I know like everything, I just throw it into it and it's always going to start instantly.
Yeah, also that boot time speed reduction is quite fast. I mean, if you add like 10 components, and you can feel the difference. And if you add like 30 files more, then you can actually feel like it gets 5 seconds slower, right? Yeah. So before you hit like 1 minute boot time, it's not that far away.
Yeah. So with Vite, I don't think you'll ever encounter server start times that would take more than 3 seconds. That's like literally like I stress tested Vite on some pretty significant sized apps, like one with 9,000 total modules. So the number of modules that's from dependencies and source code combined. And it starts in 1.2 seconds. So that's, and the same app starts with 28 seconds using rollup. So I would say with Webpack, it's probably going to take even longer. No more questions. Oh my God.
Hi, anyone.
Hi. Yeah, slightly different from toolings. So do we want to plan progressive hydration API like for SSR? Right now in 2.x, we are doing some hacks to implement those things.
Yeah, so I was originally thinking 3.1 would be a pretty SSR focused release, but now that, as I mentioned, I want to start doing smaller minor releases so we get smaller batches of new features out sooner instead of piling them up and then do a big minor release. So I think the 3.1 will probably just focus on a small, currently marked PRs that are ready for 3.1. And we get those merged and we get 3.1 out. And then 3.2, we'll be focusing on a bunch of SSR improvements. I have a very long backlog where I believe built-in lazy hydration could be one of them. So it's a bit difficult to go into all of them, but I'll probably put up a project on GitHub later to just, but a lot of these are sort of ideas that I've dropped down. So built-in lazy hydration and the ability to mark some components as, for example, if you have a component, it uses vif based on some state, but this state is actually sort of like static server-side state, like saying next or next, where you do like get static props. You know this data is fetched on the server and it never changes on the client. So the vif actually only needs to be evaluated once on the server, and for the client, it could just be ignored. So in this case, the client-side compiler can somehow, if the client-side compiler gets that information and know, okay, this vif is ever only going to be dynamic on the server, then it could be just, so in the optimization pass, it could just completely ignore that vif and assume it's going to be a piece of static content. And then once you have all these dynamic bindings that were originally would cause the optimizer to bail out, now they are considered optimizable. It enables the client compiler to take a much larger chunk of your code and squash it into a static node. And this static node will be able to, so a static node will only contain string markup. And in a tool like vpress, when you have static nodes which contain string markup, it can actually drop them in the JavaScript entirely because that piece of information is already in the server rendered markup. So it doesn't need to ship it in JavaScript anymore. So this is what we call the double payload elimination, which already works in vpress to some extent, but currently it only applies to the static parts in Markdown because we know these are safely static. But as I said, we probably want to be able to provide some sort of compile time hint for you to say this part of the markup is only going to be evaluated on the server. So on the client, you could just consider them to be static strings, which just unlocks all these subsequent optimizations, which in the best case would just completely eliminate that part of the markup from your JavaScript payload. So that's something I've actually been playing with and thought about for a long time, but just didn't have time to fully complete. But I think we probably want to queue them up as part of the 3.2 content where which is going to be SSR focused.
Yeah, and second question I wanted is there's this thing of like rendering over the wire like React server components. So does such a thing you see being existing in Vue SSR ecosystem?
So yeah, so I talked about this a bit. I forgot where I talked about it, but I did just recently. But the general idea is React server-side components kind of expands the scope of the framework by quite a bit, and it sort of mandates what kind of service setup you can use. And I don't think it's something normal users would be able to leverage unless it's like packaged up into a very opinionated meta framework like Next.js or Nuxt. But this is not something I personally would want Vue to. Essentially, I personally don't want to expand Vue's scope onto the server side just for this, because considering the benefits it provides, one of the major selling points that the React team is trying to provide for server components is to reduce model size. And the same thing, it's very similar to what I described just now, except because we have a smarter compiler, we can do that at compile time. We can achieve a lot of that at compile time already without having to force the user to use a specific server, right? So, so I think that in itself sort of makes the argument of introducing this whole concept a much weaker one for Vue in particular. So thinking of the other things like, having to, there are also a lot of technical things, technical details that I personally find problematic at least in its current implementation. Like when you have some update on the client, you actually have to send it to the server, then render on the server, then send the patch back, then apply the updates on the client. The theory is because your update may involve data fetching, and the data fetching will happen on the server. But the thing is, I just think there are a lot of unresolved questions in this whole model. I think it's reasonable for React devs to get excited about it, but I'm personally a bit skeptical, especially taking away considering the fact that we can. Compiler-based frameworks can not easily, but like compiler-based frameworks can achieve this bundle reduction, the double payload problem. We can solve that with a much less intrusive API without incurring this mandated server setup requirement. So yeah, so that trade-off just seems less preferable for us, at least. It's a little similar to how concurrent mode doesn't really make sense for anything other than React, in my opinion.
One question about server-side rendering documentation. You wrote up a pretty nice guide for SSR and Vite.
Yep.
What would you say? How much of that is translatable to SSR for Vue 3 in general? Because we currently have the situation that we're still linking from the documentation to the SSR.Vue.js docs, which are on Vue 2.
I would say most of it is applicable to. The integration is pretty generic. The only part that needs to be changed is say removing so the source code setup would be exactly the same if you were to set it up manually with, say, Webpack or other bundlers. If you're using Webpack, then the only thing that's changed is a lot of the build part would still apply in the previous SSR guide, where you still need to build a server-side bundle using Webpack, not only for production but also for development. So the difference in Vite is you use Vite's SSR load module to avoid bundling during development. But if you're using Webpack, you need to set up an in-memory Webpack instance to rebundle your server rendering code on every update.
Yeah.
That's the main difference.
Yeah.
Other than that, most of it is reusable.
Yeah, so maybe we can reuse a lot of that stuff to upgrade the general SSR documentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also regarding that, we have a pull request open still for the on server prefetch composable hook.
Yeah.
Will that make it to the next 3.1?
Yeah. So I queued up being 3.1 already. So
okay.
So I'm hoping 3.1 will be. I know
that will make Guillaume very happy.
Really happy. Yeah. Yeah, I thought about it. I saw it in the 3.0.6, but I just don't think we should do it in a patch release. Yeah.
Quick question pulling from the YouTube chat, and I recognize we're almost out of time. Evan, what are some of the challenges you see for Vue coming up in the next year or so?
The challenges, I think the challenge is really how we can manage this sort of coexistence of Vue 2 and Vue 3. I personally feel that's the biggest challenge. As we discussed earlier, how we manage the expectations about, IE11 and how we can keep developers who don't really have the luxury to be able to upgrade, because sometimes even if you can upgrade doesn't mean you should, right? If something is working fine, you probably don't want to go through all this painful and risky process just to be on the bleeding edge. But still, like these developers, they may have to keep maintaining a Vue 2 code base for a long time. How can we make sure, this whole ecosystem moves forward, but at the same time we can still bring back the stuff to Vue 2. We still we also give developers an easier time to upgrade if they want to, essentially, right? Because we've built a pretty huge user base, pretty huge ecosystem over the years with Vue 2, and we've also made some pretty significant improvements in Vue 3. So the challenge really is how to make sure whether you use Vue 2 or Vue 3, you still get the best out of the ecosystem, and how we can make sure we can sort of manage users' expectations. I think that's also a pretty challenging thing as we've tried. Sometimes introducing significant new ideas can also, go through some pretty challenging discussions, trying to convince people that something is a good idea, or maybe we can be proven wrong, right? This whole, the fact that Vue has grown so huge just makes every decision that we make, it's going to touch upon so many people. So the more people get involved, the more difficult it is for us to find a decision that pleases as many people as possible. Sometimes maybe we can't please everyone, but there are decisions to be made. So in some way, I find this to be the most challenging part. Is when you get a large enough ecosystem and community, everything gets more difficult. But in some way, the technical aspect of it becomes the less challenging one. But still, I guess that's where what you say, the bigger your power, the bigger your responsibility. So that's something we just have to live with.
What about the next opportunities of Vue?
Opportunities, I think. The tooling part is actually a pretty interesting landscape, right? Because I mean, Vite is strictly not part of Vue, but I think the fact that native ES modules, some of the new specs, major browsers finally being aligned, the fact that Vue 3 leverages proxies, I think is already a pretty we're essentially seizing this opportunity where modern language support is finally becoming close to universal, so that we can we can leverage some of these new things. So the next one is probably native ESM, where I think Vite is capitalizing on that. For the near future, I think this trend of
Custom renderers would be a nice topic to watch out for, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we've supported custom renderer for quite a while. I think one of the reasons very few people do it is because we don't document it enough. And it also has to do with the type of developers, the developer base. People who are incentivized to write custom renderers are typically those working in not very web-centric, not very web-centric projects. Like, you need to render something that's not a traditional web UI, then you need to render a custom renderer. But because Vue is very close to traditional web, right, we have fewer users who have such use cases. But still, yeah, I think we, I personally think we have so many good things, good stuff that's in Vue 3 right now that we actually haven't fully documented or like fully elaborated on, like how people can leverage them or how people can use them. Like custom renderers, some of the new script setup. I think it's Vue 3 is being slept on in some way, and we probably need to do a better job at outputting more content on our official blog to help the community to better leverage the parts from it. And I think that's something we haven't been really doing that much. It's funny because in some way, when I was working on Vue 3, I'm just always like, I just want to focus on the code and don't want to worry about putting out the words too much. But now that I think most of the code is written, it's probably time for us to do some sort of, work to just help more users understand what all these new stuff really means. Which is why I do plan to write a bit more this year. Hopefully I can make that happen.
Well, we are out of time. Thank you all for spending a few hours with us. It seems like a long time, but it's also like, oh my gosh, I'm sure that we could all keep talking for hours and hours on these things. So great conversation, definitely. If you all are watching this, as you can see, Vue community is amazing. So feel free to chip in and chat on GitHub, Discord, Twitter, etc., and find everybody. If you go to the Vue Contributor Days website, it's vuemeetup.com is the URL. You'll actually see some of the official panelists that were on this call, so you can find their Twitter handles there and continue conversation. So thank you everyone for joining, and excited about Vue Amsterdam tomorrow.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.